Good evening and welcome to the Upset Podcast. Tonight we're talking about Adventist education, wins and woes. Coming up next. Hey, welcome back to the Upset Podcast. Thank you so much for joining us. We are live. And when I say we, what's up, crew? How's it going?
What's up?
Happy Sunday.
Happy Sunday. How's everybody feeling? What'd you say, Amy?
No, I said my mic was off.
We hear you. Hello, Rochelle. Thanks for joining us. Good afternoon and happy Sunday to you. We missed our audience last week, so we're happy to be back with you again live. We hope you guys had a great week. Hello, Fernanda. Thanks for joining us this evening. Hope you had a great week as well. All right, guys. So, in terms of the headlines, what we've been seeing in our timelines on the news, of course, earlier this week, this Wednesday, we heard about another school shooting at Appalachia High School in Georgia. I think we were in the Virginia area when I got the app, my app binged that there had been another shooting, and my heart just dropped instantly because it's like, not another one. You always think that after the last one, there will be a little bit of a gap before you hear about it again, that the devastation that it caused before will somehow impact what will happen after, but it just doesn't seem to be the case. It's so sad.
Yeah, it's definitely tragic. And I heard about another incident in Florida, in Hillsborough County near Tampa, where a student made a threat and was arrested. So the authorities acted swiftly, but you can't joke around with that kind of thing, whether you're serious or not. These times are just different.
Yeah, and then in Atlanta, my wife was telling me that a student got shot. It was just one student got shot in the school. Two kids got into a fight in the bathroom. The kid pulled out a gun and shot.
How are these schools not catching these things?
The metal detectors. You know how some of the schools, I think we had someone share that sometimes they're actually discouraging metal detectors because they say that sometimes it can actually encourage it, believe it or not, because you're bringing anxiety to people by having them in the school. So I'm not sure if some of these loopholes are to blame, but it's really sad to see. Just want to say hi to Carmen from DC. Thanks for joining us, Carmen.
My question would be, how did the child get the gun in the first place?
His dad.
Yeah.
The one in Georgia, didn't he get arrested?
Yeah, they're starting to crack down on that a lot more now. I think this is the second case specifically where the stricter laws are saying that, if you've somehow made it possible for your child to have access, that you too will be prosecuted. And
makes sense.
Yeah. You have to have some level of accountability for these things, especially when it's 14 years old. Like, this is great.
Yeah, Latasha, I know this would be a whole completely show on its own, but I was having a debate with somebody and they were saying how open carry states that have open carry, is open carry, they actually have lower gun violence. Oh no, I'm sorry, that's reverse. I said that in reverse. States that have open carry is higher. Gun violence is higher.
Oh,
right. Hi. So this is a new study that just came out. I'm sure somebody could just Google it. So the person was saying basically, that we just need stricter gun laws. Stricter gun laws, the violence will go down. And I was trying to explain to the person, I'm in the South. I can't see that happening, maybe, but in Virginia and on down, people love their guns. You see shirts all the time. God, guns, family.
Yeah.
Wow.
Another question is, does the average person need to have access to an assault rifle, AR-15? Whether you like hunting, whether it's a hobby for you, but those things in the hand of the wrong person can do a lot of damage in a little time. And
Right.
so this is an election year, and you better believe that gun reform and amendment rights will be a major factor.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And-
And Reed this year it was a gift for his birthday, that unit. So there we go with the father and his involvement. Go ahead, Amy. Sorry.
Yeah, and just to add to what Kina was saying, there have been studies of other countries who have had strict gun, what's it called?
Regulations.
Regulations, yeah, strict gun regulations, and have seen promising results from it too. So what I don't understand is how, seeing all of that doesn't help,
Because people want what they want, and because they want it, they want to make sure they can still do it.
And the NRA is backed by billions of dollars.
Yep. And violence is just embedded into the DNA of America. So America's not gonna get rid of their guns.
It's just really sad because I'm not a parent, but I hope to be one day, and then to be afraid to send my child to a public school or any school for that matter, because of possible gun violence or whatever. That's just really scary, and so it's like what do you do? You know what I mean?
You're right. Well, we're talking about Adventist education tonight, so maybe that might be part of the solution.
Good segue.
You like that? Yeah. So, just a couple more comments. Yeah, we agree, Fernanda. A parent of an underage child should not provide access for that child to get that weapon. Exactly. And then this is another question, Rodney, you're bringing up. So, should teachers have arms?
To defend themselves.
It's another.
I don't agree with putting more guns in to help gun violence. I don't know.
Well, that's the argument.
That's my personal viewpoint on that. But
yeah,
that is the argument that we are having right now.
I don't know. That could be a dangerous situation because, a lot of teachers talk about in certain situations being fearful of children, and, who may attack them. And who knows if a teacher may have a moment and snap, and it's not used for an active shooter, but for something else. And so it's just it's kind of,
some states do have a stand your ground law in place, but it's not all over the country.
I do feel like maybe putting an armed guard close, like more than two in a school, might be a way to solve this. Maybe I'm gonna say you could overall solve this problem, but
ask me something.
It's putting some armed guards in there. Maybe they're actually on the lookout for these things. If anything happens,
that means more money, means more funding, more taxes, all that. But it's necessary. But no, so let's definitely keep that as a matter of prayer. But as I mentioned, tonight we are talking about Adventist education. And I don't know how I have you down here, Keenan. You're supposed to be up here because you lead us into our discussion here. So, Keenan, tell us what we're talking about and the special guest that we have joining us for this conversation.
Okay, I'm introducing the guest as well.
Yeah. You know them, right?
Okay. All right, sure. So we're talking about, and correct me on the title. Can you just give the title again, Latasha? I like the way you pronounce the title.
You like that? Adventist Education, Wins and Woes.
That's right. So we're going to have an honest conversation, talking about the positives and the negatives, a balanced conversation about Adventist education. So I just want to give, before I introduce the guests, I just want to give some statistics. Can I do that real quick on this Adventist education, just so you could just get a framework of what we're talking about? So the Seventh-day Adventist educational system is one of the largest Protestant Christian education systems in the world. It operates over 9,000 educational institutions in more than 100 countries, serving over 2 million students globally. Adventist Education encompasses all levels from elementary all the way to college. This includes 5,600 elementary schools, 2,200 secondary schools, 115 colleges and universities. And I just stop right there. I go on and on, but introducing today, we have Dr. John Alberty, our superintendent of Adventist Education in Allegheny East. Amen. Can we just show him some love?
Welcome, Doctor.
Amen. And this is your second time, right, Doc?
Yes, it is.
All right. Amen. And last but not least, we have Dr. Trevor Horatio Kinlock.
No, he did.
All right, that's a special name. That's a powerful name. It's a powerful name. That's why I called it.
The whole government name.
And he is the president of Allegheny East, the Great Allegheny East Conference.
All right.
The man, the myth, the legend is here with us this evening.
Good evening, everybody.
Yes,
Welcome, Mr. President.
Thank you, everyone.
Yep.
Glad to be here. Good to be here.
Yeah, Presidente. All right. And this is your first time here, right?
It is.
Right.
So I feel blessed, privileged to be a part of the Upsetters podcast. So glad to be here with everybody today.
Amen. And now both of you, Dr. Alberty and Dr. Kinlock, y'all both have done research in the educational field. So we're going to get to that. So I'm excited, but we got some questions. So I'm going to start off with the very first question. We're going to jump right into it. And please put your comments in the chat, those that's watching. Anything good, bad, ugly, all in between about Adventist education. We're not ducking any smoke when it comes to that. So please put that in there. But my first question is to both of you two. How do you believe the integration of faith and learning in Adventist education has impacted the development of both students, academic performance, and character?
I'm defer to our superintendent on that one, and I'll come behind him.
Okay. And can you just repeat it one more time? That was a long one.
I know.
Layman's term.
I said, how do you believe the integration of faith and learning in Adventist education has impacted the development of students, the academic performance and character?
Okay, so I think a couple of things. One, faith and learning goes hand in hand in our schools. We start every class off with prayer. We have weeks of prayer. We have worship services on Fridays in our schools. I think the difference between, and again, I'm a product of public schools, so when I say things about public school, I'm never taking away from what they offer. What I'm saying, in Adventist schools, our students, the spiritual part is reinforced. And there's studies that actually have shown that studying the Bible, reading the Bible actually increases academics as well. There's studies that have shown that. And so because we're doing that within our Adventist schools, not only are we helping them spiritually, but it also adds to the intellectual thinking of academics. And I'm going to say this, we're teaching the right things academically. In our schools, we're not teaching about, we're teaching about creation, not Darwinism. And so academically, again, we're enhancing because we're laying an accurate foundation. And then you don't even want to get me started on the fact that our schools are African American or African based, because now we're able to make sure the curriculum is culturally sensitive to our people. So we're not teaching it from I won't say whitewashed, but we're teaching it from the struggle that we went through. We're not just talking about history from that particular standpoint. We're talking about our place in history, not just as slaves, but our place on how we contributed, how this country was built on our back. So I think spiritually, academically, with the two being combined, it does nothing but make for a better all-around student.
Yeah, I think to add to what Doc Alberty said, he mentioned something that there's a lot of research, and there is a significant body of research behind this that shows that faith, personal religious faith, particularly has a heightened impact for students of color, Black and brown students. Brian Barrett, researcher in 2009, had a study that showed that he called it the invisible institution and the disappearing achievement gap. That was the title of his study. And really what that was just showing is that Black students that are a part of a church community, have higher academic outcomes. They perform better, they do better in school. Another research by Harvard-trained educational researcher William James found that personal religious faith of Black and brown students heightened, or it reduced achievement disparities by 50%. So these so-called achievement gaps, and they're really not that, they're actually funding gaps more than they are achievement gaps. Disparities that are informed by how we underfund Black and brown students. But just by being a part of a Black church and being a part of the church environment, faith has that heightened impact on student outcomes. So there's a lot of research that demonstrates that. And then of course, research that we have in the Adventist Church specifically, the Cognitive Genesis study of 2012 shows that students in Adventist schools outperform their peers, outperform the norm group on all subjects in all grades. So this is like some big data, some big macro level data that shows us that faith works, and particularly for Black and brown students. When we let faith be the foundation for their instruction, they actually do better across the board. That's like documented. So I love having this conversation because a lot of folk are not aware of that, and they think like teaching religion and faith and all of that is somehow a liability, but it's actually the benefit. It's it's the secret sauce that helps our schools to get the outcomes that we get.
Absolutely. Now, Dr. Kinlock, as Keenan referenced earlier, you did extensive research, your dissertation, I believe, specifically on Black Adventist education. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Why did you choose that? Why was this so important for you to dive a little deeper into?
So I think being a product of public school education, coming up in Los Angeles, coming up in just kind of like the urban environment, and understanding and feeling, experiencing the disparities, the microaggressions, the various issues that we had, not being seen in the classroom, all of that, not being represented in terms of who was running the school and who was teaching in the classrooms. That was an interesting experience for me. When I came out and finally went to Oakwood and graduated and all of that and came out to pastor a church, look, as God would have it, every church that I pastored had a church school. So for the last 22 years, I've had a front row seat to see what's happening with kids in the church school space. And as a result of that, I started to see, talk to the teachers, talk to the parents, and I started to see, this was my first experience. I walked into that kindergarten classroom and I saw that the kindergartners were studying the scientific method. And we're talking about the scientific method in this little small school. And I remember going back to my wife, who's an educator, and I was like, babe, when did you learn scientific method? When did I learn? Because I know I didn't learn it till probably like, I don't know, 6th, 7th grade, whatever it was in the public school system. But that got me curious. And then I went back to school to actually study. Went back to Howard to get my PhD there and did sociology of education research. And in doing that, I was able to see that there is actually something to what we are doing in our schools. And a lot of what we're doing, particularly in our Black Adventist schools, represent best practices. Not that everything is right, but a lot of what we're doing in terms of what Dr. Alberty talked about, in terms of educators of color that are there, that know how to speak to and have the pedagogical approach that is liberatory and helps to build up and empower Black students. A lot of what we're doing in terms of the faith-based approach, and then the high expectations that Black educators bring to the classroom. All of those things, when you put them together, they allow us to see some of these outcomes that we see in so many of our schools. So I walked into this thing, Latasha, backwards. I did not intend to do it, but God positioned me in it. And this is kind of what I've learned over the years.
Yeah, awesome. I love it. I love it.
Now I got a bunch of questions, but I'm not going to take the whole time. So Anybody else? Latasha, GP, Amy?
Now,
Well,
I
how
want
about
to share. I was going to share a quote from Aristotle. He said, "Educating the mind without educating the heart is no educated education at all." But in the Adventist education system, we're extending it further by educating also the soul. And so I agree with Dr. Kinlock and Dr. Alberty that we have an advantage, and the children in our schools are getting an excellent education, um, despite all the things that aren't quote unquote right or ideal.
Mhm.
Yeah, with all that being said and hearing those statistics and, showing the receipts, as we say,
Mhm.
why do you think there is still such a big resistance, even from our own members, about supporting Adventist education? A lot of people are saying it's outdated, it's not, up to snuff, like compared to some of the public schools. What do you guys say to those types of comments that we hear coming from our own members?
I'll say very quickly that I get it. Again, I didn't come up in the Adventist school context. So I came up in big public schools where we had libraries, we had all kinds of resources, etc. When I came to my first church school and kind of saw, in this small little building, couple little classrooms, not much in terms of all of the bells and whistles and all of that, I was like, okay, what's happening here? What are they doing here? And surely I'm not going to put my child in something like this. I'm not going to sacrifice my child for something like this. It was only, like I said, in getting in there and learning and seeing what was happening and and then looking at the test scores and seeing how the kids were performing, that changed my mind. So I feel like a lot of families who don't have the access that I had as a pastor, they have that same lens and they're just kind of looking at the externals, building resources, and they're like, surely not much can come out of these little buildings, that we call our Adventist church school. So that's a bit of my thought for why we have a bit of that resistance.
Yeah. And sorry.
Okay.
I just wanted to add a little bit to what Dr. Kinlock said. Me coming out of, I actually switched a couple times. I was in public school, then I was in academy, then I was in public school again, and more so because the academy that I had been attending, it only went up to 6th grade. So we just went on to public school, but then they started adding grades. And so some of my friends that were in um, um, middle school went back to the academy, but I was like, no, I'm not going back because, they don't have the resources and the things that, I could probably get from a public school that, I wanted more freedom. I wanted, more things like, this was my idea, and my parents was like, okay, well, if this is what you want, then you can go back to public school, like it's fine. We're not going to force you. But um towards the end of my public school experience, I remember that, and it all comes back to like the academic grades and all of that. And I just remember like barely, I mean, I got 7. So there's this thing where we take CXCs. It's like a Caribbean examination thing that's like big, that helps you go into college and stuff. So you can take 7 or more and you're like an honor student. And so, I took 8. So I was like, 8 is good. I'll still be an honor student. If I don't pass 1, then I'll still be an honor student. So I took 8. I passed 7. And my friends that were in academy were taking like 10, 11, and I was just like, why? Or how, but I realized, and I was thinking about this the other day. um Even though I they didn't have like all the resources that I thought that they didn't have, it was the classes were so much smaller that the teachers were able to pay more attention to them, like foster them, like build that relationship with them, and like help them get to where they need to get. So even though there's a lot of people who say that there's these it doesn't look good. Like my school, my academy school didn't look like a nice school that I would want to be at. But
Inside.
there was so much other things about it that was good that
Right.
I didn't think about when I was, I was there. So that's just
Yeah.
That's true. What were you gonna say?
Yeah. So I was going to say, one, to answer your question, Matasha, or to piggyback on what's already been said, a lot of times, well, let me go back. So my doctoral study looked at a decline in enrollment over a 20-year span and what led to that decline in enrollment. And what I found from my study was the number one reason that parents perceived led to the decline in enrollment was resources. And so that, going back to your question, a lot of times people come into our schools and they feel we don't have the necessary resources compared to the public school. Now, again, that's perception. Some of it is factual.
Right.
We don't have all the bells and whistles. Let's
Right.
just be honest. The president and I, we've been having conversations on how to get more resources into our schools. But here's what I found, and I'm speaking as a superintendent, as someone who's been a principal, and as a parent. I've seen kids go through our schools and outperform other students. I can speak for my own students who've come up through DuPont Park, G. Peters, went on to Oakwood. My son graduated from Oakwood and landed a job, let's just say a top job, where a very small percentage of African Americans land. And so that was due to his Adventist education. That's not a public school education, but an Adventist education. And what I've also found, I know it sounds cliche, well, we don't have the resources, and I know people say it's going to sound cliche. God does make up the rest. And a lot of times, that's more on the parents than the students. Let's call it what it is. If you have a good teacher in front of that student, and that student has friends every day at school and they're happy, that's all they really care about. It's the parents walking in there looking for smart boards and other things to be up and running. But the kids don't care. And I will tell you, there was a study that talked about what's the most important thing in a school. And I never forget, I was taking a class and the professor led us to the study. And, we're putting down the facility, all these different resources. And he said, the teacher. You can take away the building.
Yep.
You can take away the textbooks.
For sure.
There's a good teacher in front of that student. That student is going to be successful. And we have in our Allegheny East Conference schools great teachers. So that's what we have in our mind. And so I think the parents are looking at, or they don't have all the resources compared to the public school. But look at the fact you have a Christian teacher in front of your child throughout the day who shares your views and your values. There's something to be said about that.
That's big. That's big. And what a lot of research shows is that we do a better job educating our kids than anybody else. All right. So when you just talk in the Black context, kind of within group, we do a better job educating ourselves and our students and our young people than anybody else. And we see that reflected in all of our historically Black institutions, from our colleges and the level of professionals that they push out compared to other schools. And then we see that all the way down to our high schools, our elementary schools as well. So that's a big part of it, as Dr. Alberty said, that a building never educated a kid, but it's those teachers. And when those teachers reflect the culture and the identity of those students, our students thrive. I teach also at Howard University, and it's the same dynamic. We all know about the great Howard University and all the superlative Black excellence that comes out of that space. That's what comes out of our Black institutions, Black excellence, that we train our students to be the cream of the crop, and that's what they end up being.
Yeah, that's awesome. Let me just piggyback on what both of you all said. Just I saw that with my own son. So my son was at Calvary Grade School. He was just doing great academically. And I think somebody put it in the chat, not all Adventist schools are created equally. No knock to any other school, but we put him in a different Adventist school, and his grades did not flourish the way it did at small little Calvary Grade School. And because that teacher, and I shout out Miss Mann, she just poured so much into him. I mean, his grades were through the roof. And now I want to jump to something else. We have talked about all of the positives, right? We put it all out there. And there's more. We forgot community, right? Right? Because the kids, what's the statistics that says if the kids go to Adventist school, they're more likely to stay in the church, marry another Adventist, and stay in the church as well. So one of the best things we have for evangelism is our educational system. That's a whole nother topic right there.
Big time.
Yeah. But what are the challenges? What are the challenges that at least the parents are saying? Not all schools are created equally. And I want a two-part question, mainly for you, Dr. Kinlock. What would you say to a pastor who's not in support of Adventist education? What would you tell him to get his next check or not?
On that one, he obviously wouldn't be a part of the great Allegheny East Conference, because all of our pastors support our schools and Adventist Christian education. I just could not imagine that there would be any space for a pastor in this field that is not supportive of all of our schools in Allegheny East. So I know, Pastor Todd, we don't have that problem here in this conference. I could
not going to have it after wrong. This podcast.
Right, yeah, I'm not wrong. I'm not wrong on that one. But you talked about some of the negatives, and what are some of the negatives? I think there's any whole host of a list of challenges and issues we have. Certainly on the good part, we've got this village network. It takes that village to raise a child. And we've got that village network of church, home, and school. That's kind of our model, our template, and it works. The research says it, that when you have that interlocking bands of social support around students thrive. And so when you've got parents, and then you got teachers, and then you got church community, all of those come together to heighten the academic outcomes of students. But when it comes to some of the negatives, we know funding and resources are always a big, huge issue. Our community can be a plus, but then also sometimes our community can be a con when it comes to a lot of what we just shared are kind of the macro level realities, but they're always individual experiences that people are having in the schools. And that's not all the same. So you may have an individual that did not have a good experience in one of our schools, or their child may have been harmed in one way or another, or did not have the outcome that parent expected. And so because we are that community, that negative experience gets projected in the community for better or for worse in different ways. So that helps kind of pull down all of this air that we have in the balloon about how great we are. It helps pull it down. So I think that's one of the things. The other thing is, like Dr. Alberty said, we talked today about special education support and not having that in a robust way across our schools. Certainly a challenge, certainly a need. And I could go down the list, but Dr. Alberty, I'm sure there are a number of others that you have as well that you've heard over the years.
No, and you're right. Just to piggyback, our schools, like the comment said, all of our schools are not created equally. And I wish I could say that they were. However, again, schools are, throughout our conference, schools sit in different areas, and certain areas just have more funding. They have churches, constituent churches that might have more tithe money coming in. And so a school that might sit in Virginia may not look like a school in Maryland. However, where we need to get to is a point to where all of our schools have the same amount of resources, no matter what size constituent church is connected to it. And we're trying to do that by building a system of schools and not having schools operating in silos. So Keenan, to answer your question, it is a negative. A lot of our schools sort of operate in silos. Just because you go to one Allegheny East Conference school doesn't mean it's going to look like another Allegheny East school if it sits in a different area. And so we have to find a way to make sure that those resources are even across the board. We have some schools that are bigger, definitely. In our Maryland area, our schools are going to be bigger in size, as opposed to our two-teacher schools, where you have a principal teacher who's not only being a principal, but they're also being a teacher. That's a negative in the fact that that person's wearing two hats and they're staying very busy. And so how can we make our schools get to the point to where they all have standalone principals? And that's a process that takes time. But I can tell you that even though those are negatives, they're not negatives to the point to where we're not noticing them. We're not trying to address them. And it doesn't mean that, and I can tell you, that a 2-teacher school, now when I say it's a negative, doesn't mean that a 2-teacher school is not as good as a school with more than 2 teachers. Because I will tell you, I've gone to some of these 2-teacher schools, and these kids come out. Those are the kids that are winning the spelling bee, the STEM
Right.
there.
You better believe it.
And so the education is still there, but what I'm referring to is making sure they have the same resources as some of our schools with more financial resources.
We had a couple of comments in the chat, some questions that may speak to some of the challenges people are seeing. One of our viewers here is asking, in terms of why don't we offer scholarships for the elementary and middle school levels? For some parents, they say it's the money. There's inflation where everything's going up. If I have to cut something, I'm going to just allow my child to go to a public school where I don't have to pay tuition just so I can manage my household. What do we say to those challenges of parents who feel like they can't afford it?
That's a good question. I would say, I wish, and this is one thing that President and I, we talked about recently, I wish we had a way to leave more funding in the schools to go towards scholarships. Now, I don't want to make it sound like the conference is not doing a lot, because they are. Remember, it costs about between $14,000, $15,000, $16,000 to educate a student. And a lot of our schools' parents are only paying between maybe $5,000 to $7,000. Where does that additional funding come from? Those churches help to subsidize a lot of that. Also, the conference, what we do is we pick up a large portion. By the way, we don't ask the schools to pay for retirement and benefits. So a lot of that percentage, we also pick that up. So we're doing a lot to keep tuition low. However, we do understand that even though we're doing a lot to keep it low, if you have 2 or 3 kids and you're paying $5,000 per child, that's a lot on your budget. And so we do need to find a way to build those scholarships. And so I wish I had an answer right now. What I can say is that our president is bringing us together to put a strategic plan together. And that's going to be part of something that we talk about as we develop that strategic plan. But I will also say to my pastors, a lot of times pastors know, and I'm looking at my pastors on the screen, they know who sit in those pews and who can help provide support for families. So.
Yeah, to that stat that you threw out, Doc Alberty, average cost to educate a U.S. child in the United States, elementary and otherwise, is $14,237. That's the cost to educate a child per year, per student in the United States. So if you look at what is being charged, the charge in our Adventist schools for tuition, it's more like around 6,000, maybe 7,000, depending on the school and depending on the area, and some areas much less. So what I found in my research after just looking at everything is we are actually charging less than half the average cost and getting a higher academic outcome or product. So kind of got to frame it that way and understand what is actually happening. First of all, to say that there's a lot of the collective resourcing is kind of the strategy that we use. That's the model we use in the Adventist church to run our schools. And so that's like the full burden of the cost of education is not on any one individual parent, but it is kind of spread across the collective body of churches that through tithe, through their giving, through everything else, help to bring down the total cost and allow us to offer this more affordable, but it's still expensive to those who you got rent, you got mortgage, you got all of those things. So that's already it's built into the cake, it's baked into the cake, that lower cost. But as a result of that, because those monies collectively are going to bring the cost down, that leaves less funds that are just available for flat out scholarships. But yet and still, in many of our churches, they're providing subsidies and extra worthy student scholarships and all these other things. And then every last one of us who's been in a church school context, we're aware of those church members who will say, hey, who's struggling in the school right now? They don't want to be known. They don't want to be named. And they'll go to that business manager. They'll go to that principal. They'll write a check to help cover the tuition. So these are the ways that we've been able to cover the tuition costs for a lot of families that have need. And my practice has always been to say, if you want this type of education for your child, don't let finances be an issue. Come on in and we will work together. It's a all in strategy. So
Yeah.
the parents, the family comes with what they can do. The church comes with what we can do. The school comes with what we can do. All that together, we can educate every child that wants to come into our system.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I just want to say he's not just talking. I saw that firsthand at Calvary Grade School when he was the senior pastor, and yeah, and my wife was the principal. I saw that firsthand. Just
I love that.
Yeah, I want to
as a-
chime in because the reality is there are parents who are not willing to sacrifice for the sake of their children. I saw a meme on social media. There was a house in Greenville, Mississippi, going for $115,000, 5-bedroom, 3 bathrooms, and someone said, "This might be worth my children getting the worst education possible."
Wow.
Because Mississippi education is terrible at the bottom. But the parents said, "This might be worth my future children getting the worst education
the house.
possible." When we
Wow.
choose convenience over sacrifice,
come on.
we're saying this might be worth my children getting the
That's
worst
good.
education possible. We have to sacrifice for our children.
That's right.
Pay now or pay later.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I think it does come down to what's your priority. I think as parents, when we're looking at our children and what we want for them in life, are we saying we want them to be up here in terms of the standards of that the world sets, or are we looking at them from a holistic perspective and saying, I want my child to be a Christian. When they leave my household, I want them to have principles not only that I've taught them, not only that they learn in church, but that has been incorporated into what they're learning in school. That's my priority. I think it helps shift some of the things that we feel about Adventist education, because sometimes we feel like, yeah, that's nice. Church school is nice, but I'm ready for top tier. Like we don't even consider it top tier.
Right.
And I feel like we do it a disservice, and it really kind of shows us what are we prioritizing. Of course, any parent wants their child to be successful. Any parent wants their child to have the opportunity of a lifetime, but we have to start viewing Adventist education as part of that opportunity of a lifetime, part of that exposure to the top tier, what they can be as a person in this world. So I definitely think we need some reshaping of priority.
For sure.
I don't want to throw us on a different track, but I do believe that we have a marketing issue in Adventist education. Like we're not telling the story
Absolutely.
and the way it should be told to make it appealing and inviting to those who might benefit from it. So I'm a product of SDA education from grade to graduate school, and I was pissed off, angry when I found out about Pine Forge Academy at Oakwood College days. I was just like, why did I not hear about this school? Because my parents would have sent my sister and I there without a doubt.
That's
and
right.
so I didn't know about it. But, there were a whole bunch of us in Florida who did not hear about it. And we all went to Forest Lake. But I know if our parents had heard about PFA, we would have been there. And we would have had the Pine Forge advantage.
Big issue.
What can we do to better market what we have to offer?
Just to connect with your story, GP, I had a pastor in our field kind of say to me the other day, they asked that same question, and they were looking at another model in another system, and we're talking about this particular school that graduated 90% of their Black males and sent them off to college. And I told him, I said, man, that's a great stat, isn't it? That's an awesome stat. I said, but we're doing something better. I said, at Pine Forge, we're graduating 100% of our males and females that are getting accepted into college.
Say that again.
Newsflash, y'all. That is like breaking news. That needs to be put out there on a billboard, everything. We have 100% graduation rates and college acceptance rates at our own Black Adventist high school here in Allegheny East Conference at Pine Forge Academy. So we have to do a way better job at shouting out our good news. That has been a part of my passion, GP, as I kind of figured out, what was actually happening in these spaces. I was like, this is good stuff. And we got to shout it from the mountain.
And I will say, when we talk about marketing, I remember when I first got to GE Peters as a new principal, and the enrollment had dropped before I got there, and I was trying to figure out, why is the enrollment down? And I met the teachers. I was like, great teachers. I looked at the test scores, great test scores. What I found is that we had become our own worst enemy in the community. Again, we were talking negative about the school as a community.
Yeah.
And one of the first things that I did when I got there was I had to change the mindset. I said, if you have anything bad to say about the school, come and talk to me as the principal. Talking about it is not going to fix it. So you have to bring it to the powers that can fix it. Between myself, the board, that does fix it. But to me, it doesn't make sense to have your child in the school and then you're talking negative about the school out in the community. And what happened over those couple of years is that the people stopped complaining about the school. I came up with this mantra, the best school with the best students, and the parents started saying it. We wore it on their shirts, and everywhere we went, it was, we're the best school, to the point to where, come to find out, the kids were graduating, going to the high school that was close by. And I got a call from the principal, like, your kids over here telling everybody they went to the best school.
That's right. That's right.
But again,
and they were the best performers, Doc Alberty, at that school.
They were.
Yeah, the students that came from our school and went into the other school, they were amongst the top students in that other school.
Yeah,
that decline in enrollment question, I saw that there, and I want to just interject this. The pandemic has had a huge impact on our institutions in the church, and we've just kind of seen that. I'm traveling around to all of our churches and all of our schools in the conference, but what I've already seen is our pandemic has given a major hit to our churches. And remember, we are running church schools. And so our schools are only as successful as our churches are. So if we see churches that have declining attendance, membership, all of that, that's going to be directly reflected in the schools. And that's what our numbers are reflecting. Since the pandemic in 2020, we were just looking at these numbers just a few hours ago. Our enrollment has dipped in our school system. And it is very much due to the pandemic impact of the pandemic, as well as what has happened in our churches and the declining engagement in our churches.
Well, let me ask this, because we talked about the positive, the negatives, but what are some of the, of course, prayer, gotta pray, absolutely, fast, pray, yes, but what are some of the solutions? Yeah, 'cause I know a bunch of people got a bunch of ideas in the chats, but what are some of the solutions that's out there, that you think we're leaning towards?
I'm putting this up, Keenan, to kind of follow up with that, because a lot of people are saying in the chat, we talk about, you mentioned it, John, some of our schools are attached to maybe a primary church, but people want to know, should all of our churches, whether there's a school or not attached to them, be part of this support for the schools throughout the whole conference? Should it be a family affair?
What's funny is that, in full transparency, the president had me working on a Sunday today, because we sat down literally to talk about our schools. And that was one of the things that we discussed. How can we have each church be more supportive financially for the schools? And again, that has to be navigated in a certain way, because again, it just has to be navigated in a certain way. But no, it is part of the conversation. And I think, again, that's where that strategic plan is going to be vital, because right now you have all these ideas, like have all of our schools all of our churches to be part of our schools. But again, it needs to be flushed out, put in a strategic plan so we can see, how does that really look? It's to say, but how do you go to a pastor that's already trying to keep their lights on and say, we need to give you we need you to take a percentage of your the money that's coming in and give it to schools. We know it needs to be done, but how do we do that? How do you frame it? And so, although we that's one of the ideas, and it's just one that we put on the table, all of it needs to be flushed out. Now, again, I'm going to always say, all of our churches, hear me out, are connected to a school. Pine Forge Academy. That school belongs to every church in the conference. It's a conference school.
Yeah. I put it just this plain. The Bible has said it the best: where there's no vision, the people perish. And in the absence of that vision, that big, broad vision for where we want to go and where the Lord wants to lead us, I think we have our challenges. There's so much that we can do, as our superintendent just alluded to. One of the key things is, we know everything starts and ends with leadership. So one of the key roles is to make our schools better, is to ensure that we are recruiting, training, and retaining the best Adventist principals to be able to build our great schools. That's just one thing that I learned, that any great school, you show me a great school and you're going to show me a great principal that is there leading that teacher team, engaging with those parents, making sure that those students get what they need. So just from an organizational level or broader level, it is then to make sure that we are recruiting the best talent. We are training them to make sure, giving them the support that they need to be successful in their role. And then we are retaining them, and kind of, we have this revolving door in education right now where folk are in for a few years and then they go out. So we want to be sure that we're doing what we need to do to retain teachers. We've talked about different strategies to bring in more resources into it, but I think really enhancing and elevating what is happening in our schools. The product speaks for itself. Most folk aren't arguing about the product of Adventist education and Black Adventist education, at least most folk I've engaged with over the decades. The children and how they perform and what they do speaks for itself. Highlighting that a bit more. And again, I'm glad y'all are having this conversation, because this gives us an opportunity just to kind of engage with folk on where we need to go. But we have to have that vision. We have to have that forward-thinking direction on what we ought to do. I think the constituent arrangement is a great model to help build up our schools. But I think there's no silver bullet in that regard. Sometimes too many cooks spoil the pot. And when there's a political dynamic. So the more churches you have in an official constituent arrangement, sometimes that can be good. But the con to that is you've got these dynamics of, well, whose church will and priorities are going to be reflected, and some of those intra-church politics can begin to manifest. So it's not an easy thing running a system of schools, but those are some of the dynamics that we have to work through.
Absolutely.
So I just wanted to suggest that we bring back school fairs. I don't know. I went to Southern Adventist University, and I was already at Southern, and they had a school fair, and that is when I learned of all the other Adventist universities that we had, and I was like, wow, like, why didn't someone tell me about this? Why didn't someone like tell me that there were all these other schools? Like, I literally had to do the research on my own to find these things out. I think this is why, like the marketing, like what GP was saying, like we have to do a better job of getting the word out to not just our conference churches, but also to other churches as well. And not even just, I would say even international, because I am a product of Cayman Islands, where a lot of people, a lot of students from there went overseas to Adventist colleges. So those are the things that, and that I think that we're not getting the word out about, because I didn't know a lot about the Adventist schools until like we were like, oh, maybe we should do that, or and then we would have to Google it and look up the best schools for this and that and such and such, so that's just an idea. I think that we should bring back school fairs, bring back some way to get everybody involved, some way to promote our schools, some way to promote our Adventist education overall.
I'm glad you brought that up, Amy, because it made me think about this question here. How can our Adventist schools appeal more to the community? Because I think this is more for resources. But also, I was also thinking how a lot of people, even non-Adventists, who want their children to attend a Christian school, who may not want to go to the traditional Catholic school, and they want this as an opportunity. I feel like in times past, maybe our marketing has been targeted just to Adventists. We're marketing during church service, but making a real effort to like go into the surrounding community to
Mhm.
recruit parents. A lot of times, particularly with Pine Forge, now that I have a child there, and I'm listening to other parents talk about how when they found out about Pine Forge Academy, they were like, "You, Amy," they were like, "How come no one told us about this sooner?"
Yeah.
Like they're so excited
Absolutely.
about.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're like, wow, like there's just surprise that is not known as well. And it's one of those things, I don't know if we're just so used to it that we forget that this is something worthy of sharing. But I
Mhm.
definitely think it's important, like you were saying it to, and yeah, hey, we're part of communication. So, we can work alongside with our schools to see what we can do to help them promote the schools a little bit more. I mean, we have to believe in our product, I think, first
Yes.
of all,
Yeah,
because when we believe in it, it makes us a little bit more
exactly.
eager to share it.
That's right.
Yeah, and you all heard what the president said to all those pastors. He put them on notice. Put them on notice right here on the Upsetters podcast. But I do want to say this too, though. I heard a statistic that in Africa right now, the population is 1.4 billion, approximately, and the average age, those in Africa is 19, and they're looking for colleges. And so just talking on a college level, we have to do just a better job of getting
Stop.
the word out there.
Yeah.
I'm
Because
proud that I went to Southern Adventist University. Just so
are they
you
still
know,
segregated?
GP.
I mean, no.
He keeps holding up his hat like as if
Listen, you're
like I was
outnumbered here.
missing out on something.
You're
Like,
outnumbered.
No, but
Three of us
I'm saying in the Adventist schools, from what I read in Europe, they are lowering their tuition to help out students to come from Africa.
Mhm.
So we just have to be creative.
Mhm.
Got to be creative in helping our schools out.
Mhm.
I
Absolutely.
agree.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, all right. Well, Latasha, I'm turning it back over to you right now.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I'm just going through the chat because there are a lot of great comments in here that I want to make sure that we talked about. Oh, someone was asking, and John, I think you get this question every time. Every time we have you on here, and that's about how can we get a school going in our particular area. In this case, it was Delaware Valley. Someone was asking, but for those constituents who maybe see a need in their particular community where we don't have a school, can you just share like the process for how we get a school going in our conference?
Okay, so K through 8 schools or pre-K through 8 schools are started at the local level. And so you would need to have one of your churches or whatever church is in that area would need to come together and say that they want to start a school. If they come together and say they want to start a school, then of course the Office of Education, the union will get involved to help them through the process. So we can have a school anywhere in our conference, but it has to be started on that local level. Conferences start high schools. And so that's the difference. So we started Allegheny, I don't want to say Allegheny East because it was started by Allegheny, started Pine Forge Academy. But for our K through 8 schools, those are actually started on a local level. So a lot of times people come to me and say, Alberty, we need a school in Philly. And I'm like, you do need a school in Philly. However, it would take those churches or one of the churches coming together to say, we want to start a school. And then you bring me into the process to walk you through the process. And again, I always suggest when people bring that question to me, you don't have to try to eat the whole elephant at once. You may say, you know what, we're going to start kindergarten, and then we'll add first grade, then we'll
Or
add
daycare.
or daycare. Yep, start at the day. And I think Kenny, you and I just talked about that the other day when I was in Virginia. We'll start daycare, and then we'll add kindergarten first and second. And so there are ways to do it. But yeah, to answer the question, it started at the local level.
That's right. That's right. It starts at that local level. And if you have that passion, that burden, find some other folk in your church that have that passion and that burden. And then go to your pastor and speak to your pastor and ensure that your pastor has that passion and that burden. And then, because it helps, the more support that you can get, then talk to some of the other churches and the other local pastors and come together. That's how this process kind of starts. It's not top down, but it really is bottom up. Show me a successful Adventist school, and I'm going to show you 3 ingredients. One is a dynamic, engaged, great leader principal. The other is an engaged and supportive pastor. that is on the ground with that school. And the other is a good, engaged school board made up of the parents and others. If you have those three working together, you're going to have a school that's doing it, that's making a difference.
It's 7:00 somewhere. Sorry, I just heard it over time. So this is a question. This is always our opportunity to clear up little rumors that sprinkle out there, or someone said, is there Tiffany's asking, is it true the AEC is trying to start a high school in Maryland, and would that take away from our great Pine Forge Academy?
That's a good question. I guess I'll take that one. Right now, we're not in the process. We are, to be clear, we are not in the process of starting a high school in Maryland. However, we do have a systemic issue that sometimes can be the elephant in the room. And the fact is, within that Maryland area, the majority of those students end up going to Tacoma Academy. And so what happens is that not only are we losing students to Potomac Conference, but we're also losing tithe-paying members who are going to transfer their membership to a Potomac Conference church in order to get that subsidy. And so, no, we're not trying to start a school. However, just the other day when we were in Virginia, there was a parent who asked the question, hey, I want to send my kid to Pine Forge, but it's too far. What options do we have down here in Virginia? And so it's no one ever wants to take away from Pine Forge. Pine Forge is our school. You would never catch me in any venue saying anything about not supporting Pine Forge. I am green and white right now, and forever.
That's job security right there, everybody.
But that being said, we also still have to find other creative ways. And one of the things the president and I talked about, and again, these are ideas we just sat down today just for a spitballing session and throwing things at the wall and just putting some ideas out there. But one of the things that came up was we need to have more of our elementary schools go to 10th grade, because they can be junior academies. Baltimore Junior Academy, Ephesus Junior Academy, DuPont Park was a junior academy. In fact, DuPont Park was one of the biggest feeders into Pine Forge, because those students would go to 10th grade and then they would go to Pine Forge for 11th and 12th. So I think if we can have more of our schools go to 10th grade, we keep them with us a little bit longer. And then by the time they reach 11th grade, those parents feel a little bit more comfortable about sending their kids away to school. So there are other ways, things we can do, or say, hey, how can we build a satellite class, a satellite school that's online that works alongside Pine Forge. So you may have a parent say, hey, I can't afford to send my kid, or I don't want to send my kid to a boarding academy, but I want to still be part of the Pine Forge experience. How do we set up satellite campuses to do that, or virtual campuses that work alongside Pine Forge? And so we're looking at a lot of different ideas in order to support Pine Forge, but also support the need that's out there. And yes, BJA used to also go to 10th grade. I cannot forget about BJA.
Yeah, there's an 11th commandment in our conference. I hope everyone knows what this is. Certainly the pastors know. Thou shalt always support Pine Forge. Right? That is the 11th commandment. That is just clear. You cannot break that commandment and be a part of the Alleghenies family. You'll be excommunicated. So there's always a diehard support for what the greatest Black high school institute in the country, faith-based institute in the country. Pine Forge, 100% graduation rates. It's got a storied history of who comes out of this great institution. So that's the 11th commandment. That notwithstanding, there's kind of this historical data now, this record of what choices parents have been making. And though we have we're always going to push and support Pine Forge, the reality is that Pine Forge can't educate all of our students in Alleghenies Conference. Mm-hmm. We can't educate all of our high school students. So we have to figure out how to keep Pine Forge strong and how to grow it and make it even more robust, but then how to also find educational solutions across our territory for other families that may choose for any number of reasons that Pine Forge can't be an option for them. Now, I've pastored across this conference now, and I get the burden. I've heard it from the families who Pine Forge is just, they cannot do it for any number of reasons. But then there are many families who can, and we support them to get there. I've been in the pastoring for 22 years now, and in the DMV area in particular, over 90% of our kids that leave 8th grade end up not going to Pine Forge. Over 90% of our Adventist kids in our churches in the DMV end up not going to Pine Forge. That's over decades. All right. And that's not because we have not been pushing and touting Pine Forge. That's just some of the reality on the ground. Where do they end up going? They end up going to other private schools. They end up going to Tacoma Academy. They end up going to public school. And the outcry has been from the community down here is we need a Black Adventist educational option for our kids down here. So I believe allowing families to have that self-determination, to be able to self-determine for themselves what is going to be in their best interest for themselves, for their families, and for their churches. I think that's best. We're always going to rally and rah-rah and keep Pine Forge strong, but it cannot be at the expense of not doing what we ought to do. We ought to be doing both, is finding solutions for our families in the DMV. Also in the Delaware Valley, the same thing. When the communities come together and self-determine, let's let those communities work their will to do what they believe is in the best interest of their kids.
Yeah. And I actually wanted to ask Dr. Alberty that question, like, do you think it would take away from Pine Forge if they were to have a school in that area? Like, if we're losing those kids, then wouldn't it be a good idea to put a school in that area to get those kids that the parents don't really want to, put them in a boarding school? Because boarding schools, not everybody's like okay with that, and even like I said, I don't have any kids, but I'm also thinking of the future and like what I want, my kids to, what I want to do with my kids, and would I put them in a boarding school versus somewhere that they will come home every day, that kind of thing. So, like, would that really take away from Pine Forge, even though we're already like losing those kids right now?
That's a good question, Amy. Honestly, I believe it would not take away from Pine Forge. And here's the reason why. Number one, those parents that want to send their kids to a boarding academy, they're going to send their kids to a boarding academy regardless, because every family pretty much has a day school option, whether it's a public school option or an Adventist school option. They all have a day school option. And so parents are going to make up in their mind right off the bat, am I going to send my child to a boarding academy or am I going to put them in a day school? And so because we know they already have both options, and that we're seeing, like Dr. Kinlock said, that 90% of those parents who are coming out of our schools in the Maryland area are already sending them to the day school option, then we know it's not pulling from Pine Forge because that option's already been there. The difference is their day school option is not an Allegheny East Conference day school option. And so I think it would, and again, I don't want to go against that 11th rule and make sure I say something. It makes sound talking negative about Pine Forge, but the reality is, if they're going to have an option, why not make it a Allegheny East Conference option? And so, yeah, although I know that always comes up because you have parents that are in that DC, DMV area that are constantly having those conversations. Why am I sending my child to a Potomac Conference school? And they're capitalizing on us. You have Potomac Academy, you have Spencerville. They're literally capitalizing. And when you walk into a lot of into their schools, you know what they look like? You look like Allegheny East Conference School. Let's just call it what it is.
That's what they are.
Teachers are Black, the principal's Black, the students are Black. I remember I went to a concert and Tacoma Academy song and Potomac and Pine Forge song. If you didn't know, now again, let's just call it what it is. Pine Forge song way better. I'm just going to always. I said it. I said the Pine Roseboro shout out. But the bottom line is, all the students on the stage for both were Black and brown students. They were Black and brown students, and so the difference is we're keeping their schools open. Let's call it what it is.
True.
We're keeping their schools open.
That is it. That is it. I'll say it a little further. The reality is that we are subsidizing a school in another conference. We are subsidizing their school. So the status quo means that we are supporting somebody else's school and not our own. That's what's happening right now. The dollars are going to another school and not ours.
So what would you say? Oh, I'm sorry, get it, Doc.
No, so so we're not taking away from Pine Forge, and I like the way Pastor Kinlock put it. We're not taking away from Pine Forge, but what we're doing is subsidizing Potomac Conference and Chesapeake schools.
Yeah.
No, I was just gonna say, just for a parent right now that's on the fence, and they may be listening to this right now. They're like, "What should I do? What should I do?" What would you tell them? What were closing remarks? What would you tell them?
To send them to Pine Forge.
Or elementary school. Don't forget those elementary. You're not yet there, but
Yeah,
I
this is
would say
both for,
something I heard.
Oh, yeah.
It's a quote that says, Seventh-day Adventist Christian education doesn't cost, it pays.
That's right. I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if I were to answer that question, just listening to this conversation, I think it goes back to what I was saying earlier. Like, just really look at your priority for your children, what you want most for your child in life. And I'm talking about holistically. I'm not talking about within the next 5 years. I'm talking about for the rest of their lives. And when you think about that, think about what Adventist education can do for your child spiritually. I feel like that's the most important element for my child. That's what I care about the most. That's what I tell them. Like, when I'm long gone, the one thing I want you to promise me is that your relationship with God is always intact. And because that's the priority that I've instilled in them, I want them to be able to see that in the education that they receive as well, so that they can understand that true knowledge comes from God. And when you can incorporate that with some of the worldly things that you are learning, you will always excel. And for those who feel like they can't afford it, you've heard it here tonight. Where there is a will, there is a way. When you make it known that you want to send your child, there are people who will rally behind you and make it happen.
Right.
Don't back off on it. Don't tell yourself you can't do it. Put it out there and watch God work. We've seen it time and time again, and I know that he can do it for you. So without hesitation, if you feel God is leading you to put your child in one of our Adventist schools, do it. Just do it.
Absolutely.
I would say when I preach sermons about Christian education, I always end it with something that Spirit of Prophecy said. It talks about the fact that when we stand in judgment, we're going to stand in judgment with our kids for our kids as well if they don't make it. I didn't know that. I don't want to stand before my kids and say I didn't do everything possible to make sure they were saved. And part of that, doing everything possible, is putting them in an environment where they're going to learn of the Lord, where they're going to have someone in front of them who shares their same values. We have to think about the fact that at the end of the day, this life is fleeting. And the only thing we have to take to the kingdom is our character. And do we want to put our kids in a place that's not going to support that? Or do we want to put them in a place that's going to build their character, that's going to make sure they're prepared for the kingdom? And that as parents, at the end of the day, we can say that we did everything that we could. And I'm not going to ever sit here and say that our schools have all the bells and whistles. But if you want to put your child on track to make it to the kingdom, put them in one of our schools. Put them in the school that shares Christian values.
Yeah. I think I would say I came from a completely different background, public school education. So my lens was that Adventist schools were inferior. All of my professional experience has taught me the exact opposite now. My research experience has taught me the exact opposite, is that our schools are not inferior, but they actually are superior. There's an advantage and an edge that our kids get, a holistic advantage. Certainly the spiritual component, their spiritual development, their academic development, their social development, their leadership development. All of these are a part of what happens when we entrust our kids to God's schools, and we work together with teachers, with principals, to give them the very the very best. I've seen it on the academic side. I've seen it personally as a parent. I remember coming into this thing, you guys, as a pastor parent, being sent to a church school before I had kids. But when we had our first child and they start to become school age, I remember kind of the folk wouldn't say it, but I sensed it from them. They're like, they're gonna put their kid in the school now. Let's see what they're going to do. And my wife and I had a good heart to heart. And what we were very clear on was we were not going to sacrifice our child for any church school or to make any church members or anybody else feel happy or appeased. We ended up praying through and seeing the results in the school. And we got to the place where we said, yes, we want to send our child to this school because we see the product and that it works. And we did it. And both of our children are stellar students to this day. They got the great academic and social and spiritual foundation from pre-K all the way till now. So long story short, Adventist education and Black Adventist education works.
Love it. Love it. Oh, wow. Thank you, guys. This is encouraging. And I hope our listeners and our viewers are feeling that fire under them. Guys, it takes all of us. It really takes all of us to make this thing work. And so we definitely appreciate your support. Don't forget, don't wait for it to become a church initiative. If you're hearing this and you want to give to Adventist education, what should they do, John? If somebody's listening right now and they want to support a school or they want to support a child, what can they do?
They want to support a school. I recommend that they go to the website for that particular school that they want to support. And normally on that website, they can give. If they don't have a place on the website where they can give, they can call the principal of the school, and that principal can tell them how to give. Definitely, if you don't have a school particular that you want to give to, you can always give to Pine Forge Academy. Always give to Pine Forge Academy. And Latasha, on another point, before we get off the call, I just want to put out there the Cowboys beat the 33-10.
Is that what you're glancing at right now, John?
Just one thing. So,
God, pray for him. Pray for him. God, keep him in prayer.
I love it. Love it. Thank you guys so much. Thank you, Dr. Kinlock, Dr. Alberty, for joining us for this important discussion.
Thank you for having us. Thank you for having me.
It's just so encouraging to see our leadership so passionate about something like this. And, as your constituents, we're going to rally behind Adventist education as best as we can. Rodney said, Cal, what? That was you. But no, thanks everybody. Thanks everyone in the chat. Thanks for those who were sharing their personal testimonies about what Adventist education has done for you and your children. Please go back and read those for those who are watching. And thanks for tuning in this Sunday. And we'll see you back here next Sunday with another topic. But until then, have a great week, everybody. See you later.
All right.
Bye.